Hello, everybody.
Good morning.
What do you think about the entrance?
I can't get enough of it.
I love the gong, especially on a Friday morning.
It's a great way to start your day. If you're not starting your day with a gong ring, what are you even doing?
Exactly, 100%. Thank you, everybody. Hope everybody's having a good Friday start to their day. We got Tyson Lawrence with us today, joining in for conversation. And Tyson, thank you for coming on. It's a pleasure to have you. Love to learn a little bit more about you, but then also just talk all things freight as well. Where were you calling in from?
Well, thank you for having me on, Christian. I appreciate it. I've been kind of a fan for a while, and it's great to be on. But I'm calling in from San Francisco Bay Area, so we're out here in California.
Bay Area, baby.
You bet.
It's what, 6 a.m. out there, Tyson?
You bet. Yeah, 6:05. 6:05.
Well,
Early, right?
I'm always curious about like the West Coast, because like the West Coast typically has to wake up a lot earlier to like cover freight on the East Coast, a lot earlier than like the East Coast people. So I'm kind of curious, like when you're out like brokering freight, what was your schedule like? Were you like up like really early, or how did that usually look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did produce too. So we were up early out here on the West Coast, and there was a period in my career where I was driving down to Monterey. I was working out of the Monterey, Bay Area or Monterey area, and I would commute from the Bay Area, and it was about an hour and a half down, and then coming back, it was about 2. And going down in the morning, it was beautiful. You'd come in right along the ocean as the sun was coming up. But about 2 years of doing that, I started getting kind of bitter, and I'm like, I think I need to make a change, because that's not the most beautiful commute you can have. But
yeah, I was going to say, you can't be bitter driving to Monterey. That does not suck.
Right, exactly. But yeah, early mornings, I'm kind of long removed from those, but I do have a lot of respect for all those early rising freight brokers on the West Coast.
Cool.
Competing for trucks.
Yep.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good though, because your day can also end much earlier as well.
Right. Yeah, because then you'd be done like 1, 2 o'clock, something like that.
Yeah.
So,
definitely.
But sometimes you get caught up in this. Yeah, you get caught up in everything, and next thing you know, it's 3, 4 o'clock before you get out of there, and you've worked more than everybody. But it is what it is.
So, Tyson, just for the audience, so everyone knows who you are, can you give us a quick introduction to who you are and what you did in the logistics industry and what you're currently doing?
Sure. So, Tyson Lawrence, I've been in the industry for 24 years. I was originally hired by C.H. Robinson in 2001. And like most people, I had no clue what logistics was and had no clue what I was getting myself into. All I knew, I was moving from, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. I'm a Pacific Northwest native, but they were going to move. I just graduated from Washington State, and they were going to bring me down to California. I was 21 years old and footloose and free and single, and I didn't care what they were going to have me do. I was going to, take the opportunity, but ended up loving it. Had a great experience at C.H. Robinson. I left there to do a couple little other things before I started my own freight brokerage in 2006. And we were brokering mainly produce freight, working with a large retail grocery chain on the West Coast. You guys probably know them out there in Chicago. But from that, I grew that for about 10 years. And then I ran into a common problem, or learned a lot during that time, and basically got kind of over leveraged with one customer, and had a dispute with them, and it all crashed down. Yeah, it's pretty gnarly. Being in the produce game, there's a lot of stuff that can get you, and especially when it was in my own MC.
Like you gave them too much credit, basically.
Basically contractual freight. Long story short, they, I would take losses in the summertime and make them up in the other 9 months of the year. And private equity came in and bought the company and kind of changed everything. And I had relationships for 10 years. I knew these people's kids and families and stuff. But I don't know if you know much about private equity, but when they get involved in the picture, that stuff doesn't matter.
Sure.
Yeah.
They're competing for their jobs, and so anyway, I was unfortunate that it came into the point where it was right around the fall. So I lost all the freight that I was going to make money on coming up in the next year, and we couldn't come to an agreement on it. And one thing led to another. And I basically had to fire them, and then it got the ball rolling, and it eventually led to us going bankrupt.
How much is a single? What's your new rule in terms of total customer makeup of your whole business? Like no more than 10%.
Yeah, 10%'s it. 30%. You're getting into, the danger zone. But yeah, I mean that was my biggest.
Isn't that just like a risk inherent to having a small brokerage, right? I mean,
yes.
you like necessarily can't have that many customers. Like if it's just.
Yeah.
Like how many people? Like was it just how many folks were on your team? Like how big was the team?
So we grew it to 10 million, and at the end we were I had like 10 people.
Yeah.
So I was about $1 million per person. And that included back office staff. And again, it was my own MC at that time. I was an independent, agent. But yeah, it is a challenge. It's a big challenge, and it's
also a challenge. It's also a challenge for reps too, though. Like at bigger brokerages, right? Like they're almost like mini brokerages, and it's easy to get. It's easy to put all your eggs in one basket when you get like a bunch of freight from one customer, and you're like, "Damn, this is sick." But then you have to remind yourself that when you buy the G-Wagon, you lose the customer, you're fucked.
You're right. You're right, and anything can happen, especially in the produce game.
Right.
And one of the things about them is like when I got in through the produce, we got and it's kind of one of my strategies now with customers is just trying to get in the door in any way you can, and then you spread like the plague within the organization. And that's kind of what I did with Safeway. So we were doing a whole lot of stuff besides produce, so it felt diversified, right? But you were really not, because one thing happens over here, it affects it over here in that relationship. And that's essentially what happened is, we had an issue over produce. It affected floral. It affected dry. It affected, anything else that we kind of had going within them. So it was a false sense of, security. And I mean, don't get me wrong. It kept me up at night. When it dawned on me, that I was like, holy shit, something could happen here, and I'd be in real trouble. It kept me up. And we were trying to diversify towards the end to the, very last minute. And that's where it kind of led into my next thing, which was my agency at Global Trans. And I created Tactic Logistics Group, which is, you like this, I have some German heritage. So tactic is, the word for strategy in German. And so at that moment, I was trying to wind down one business that's going through bankruptcy and start another one without stepping on each other's toes with legal and, all that kind of stuff. And so I was real strategic at that time. Plus, I was being real strategic about how I wanted to build the next company. I wanted to do it with small to medium-sized businesses that I could take a consultative coaching approach to and grow with them. And I wanted to offer them more than, I wanted to do everything, full truckload, LTL, all that stuff. And, I had experience from working at C.H. Robinson in kind of a lot of different angles, because we were all under one roof. So I would go and, hang out with the intermodal guys, learn about that, So I knew that when I built Tactic, I wanted to build it as a strong, fundamentally sound organization.
And you went the agency approach just because it was like kind of not the same. You had access to more resources. You didn't have to worry about the back office stuff as much. Like
100%.
Yeah.
Well, and so during that time, I was creating my own internal. We were doing our own. So you have to kind of go back to where this was. There wasn't anything a lot off the shelf technology-wise. TMS, things like that. That wasn't around. And so we built our own internal TMS, and we were, I was looking frantically trying to expand our offerings. And so about that time, I got approached by a friend of mine who said, hey, you got to come talk to these guys. They've got a platform that will work exactly for what you're looking for. Because I was looking for LTL. And I was like, who are they? And they're like, they're Mike and Andrew Leto. And the company's called Global Trans. And I said, oh, really? Okay, well, introduce me. So he introduced me, and Mike flew out to the Bay Area like the next day with Andrew Haynes, I think it was. I don't know if you know him. I think he's over at my carrier, or one of those two. Anyway, and they did a whole presentation for me. At the time, they were kind of doing franchises. They hadn't really settled on the agent model. Global Trans had only been around a couple of years. And so all I cared about was their LTL platform, because it gave me access to blanket rates, which is what I needed. And so we started that. So as my first business, PacWest Distributing, was going down, we started to kind of do stuff with Global Trans more on their platform. And so our customers would come through our platform and go over to theirs, and they wouldn't even know they were leaving ours. It was kind of a cool situation. So I broke that off and created a tactic with that little bit of customers that I had when PacWest was going down. So I kind of had to maneuver that whole thing and make sure we were doing it according to, laws and whatnot.
What's it? So do I understand that you're operating under Global Trans Authority?
Mm-hmm.
What's it like? What are some of the pros and cons that you've kind of seen, like at being an agent, essentially under
Global Trans?
Yeah, under Global Trans, or just in general? I don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so coming from, doing it all myself, wearing 17 hats, having to handle the capital that was required, even at $10 million, and I started that business with nothing. The only way I started that business was because I got paid earlier by my customers than I had to pay my carriers. So I was able to build up kind of a war chest to be able to, get some stuff going. Well, that created, I had a whole 2 or 3 people that were working in that aspect of my business that I call non-revenue producing people. And so when you went to Global Trans, you didn't have to worry about that. That kind of took it off the plate. Excuse me. All you had to worry about now is booking your own freight, handling your customers, that type of stuff. And then that eventually went away to where we were, they were booking they had carrier reps that were doing our full truckload stuff for us. So yeah, it was a lot. So we eventually did 25 million at Global Trans before we were sold, and I only had 5 people. So compared to 10 million, I think that kind of shows.
5 million ahead is no small feat, I wouldn't say.
Yeah, we were humming. We were really humming, and we were really lean. And like I said, I kind of knew what I wanted to do the second time around, which was the first time around, there wasn't the resources, which why I love Free Caviar and I love what you guys are doing is because you give so much context to people who are getting started in this industry. We didn't have it. And I love it even more because you guys are picking up on jokes that we had privately in our office, 15 years ago, the strong Sergey vibe, all that stuff, even like please advise, those were our favorite emails to send back to each other. We're like, please advise on this, because it sounded so great. But anyway, it's a different thing doing it as an agent. And I recommend it, especially now as the industry's going to go the agency route. There's more options out there. They have a lot more technology and back office support than doing it on your own. It's a lot tougher doing it on your own.
Yeah.
So I guess everybody can have a choice, but I'm trying to understand a little bit better. Why doesn't everybody just do a freight brokerage, agency model, like where they will just operate under somebody else's authority? I
think there's a common misconception, and one of the things that I had to make a decision about was how was I going to market my business? Was I going to market myself as Global Trans, or was I going to market myself as Tactic Logistics Group?
Yeah.
And Global Trans, because be honest with you, I feel like doing like the Tactic Logistics Group or doing whatever, it's kind of an ego thing. Is how big is your ego? Like if you want to be out there like, hey, this is my company and I'm just powered by Global Trans, that's great. But you're not going to reach as many people. People aren't going to know it. You have to do more kind of marketing stuff to kind of get that out there. Or Global Trans, you kind of just ride on their tails, right? And also I had the idea if I wanted to sell to Global Trans eventually. And this actually came into a great play was when I sold the business, there was no change to my customers. They only knew me as really global. They only really knew us as Global Trans, right? So it was like, there wasn't even really an announcement made out to our customers because nothing changed.
So Global Trans is essentially rolling up piece by piece, like its agents as they grow?
They were, and I think they'll get back to it. That right now they're going through, they got acquired. So the funny story about this is that when I sold my business in 2021, we kind of hit a snag toward the end, and it was dragging out. And Bob Farrell was the CEO at the time, and he said, "Tyson, we got to get this." He was like, "We got to get this done." And I'm like, "Look, Bob, I love your energy to get this done, but this is like a big deal for me, and I want to make sure everything's done right." He's like, "All right, well, we'll get it done." Well, I didn't understand what the urgency was, but we closed on a Tuesday, he called me on Friday or Thursday night. I'll never forget this. He called me Thursday night and said, "Hey, Tyson, I just wanted to give you a heads up. I couldn't tell you this before, but the way it was pitched to me was we're merging with Worldwide Express and we're announcing it in the morning." And I said, "Wow, okay, I just hitched my wagon to you guys 2 days ago, and now it's kind of like, things are changing," but I didn't care. I just put it that way. I was like, whatever, I'm selling my business.
Are you able to spin off of Global Trends? I know it's going to be basically like an entire from zero marketing effort, but if you build up the book of business and you operate under Global Trends as authority, like, is there something in brokerage agency agreements that prevents you from leaving with the book of business you've obtained under that authority?
No, but I think you're going to have to negotiate your way out of that.
Okay.
It just kind of depends. I think it's a case by case basis, especially inside that business, and how they handle it. But yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I didn't see any better options out there at the time. And I think some other agencies have kind of caught up, or some other businesses have kind of caught up with their agency model. And I think you're going to see more of the agency model out there, because it's going to be hard to start a business and do a business as an independent agent. You know what I mean? Or not an agent, I'm trying to use the word, an independent brokerage. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So what is it? What's the proper terminology? Because I've recently been having difficulty kind of identifying this. Is Global Trends the agency, and then the LLC underneath it is the agent, or how does that?
That's a good one. I don't really know, because it's kind of interchangeable. I kind of use them both ways. So,
there's like language in this industry that's just not standardized, and it's just used
100%.
and people throw things around, and then I guess everybody's supposed to assume everybody understands what everybody means, but
yeah,
not all of it's important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, some of this stuff too is just so great now. It's because it's becoming more clear, because people are having these conversations, and you're establishing certain things that before, I keep talking about the old days, but I mean, like, we didn't have the technology and the insight that we do now. Especially, like, I remember when Sonar came out, and Sonar was, like, to me, and still one of the best ones, for giving a marketplace kind of outlook. Before, we relied on anecdotal evidence. We would just be like, "Oh, there's something going on in Chicago, so there's going to be a lot of trucks dumping there, and so freight's going to go down there." I mean, it was just, even at C.H. Robinson, you were relying on kind of just anecdotal evidence of seasonality.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you just got an opportunity to see the market clearly.
And I feel like a lot of people still rely on anecdotes.
Probably, it's going to be hard to kick it out. I mean, there's a lot of hard things, legacy
especially
things
on the fleet side. Especially on the fleet side, I talked to a buddy of mine yesterday who owns like 10 trucks, and we were just talking about the market, and he basically gets like all of the rates. Like, he doesn't subscribe to any of the rating tools, and he just like calls his boys up, and they all just talk about what they get paid in certain areas, and that's like their Sonar. It's just like, call the homies and see what rates they got. And if it's like way over market, they just think that's what the market is,
Right.
Better or for worse. I'd probably do the same thing.
We used to call them the little old ladies, because they would talk like little old ladies, and it was like, this was before, I mean, even like cell phones, where if the truck driver had a cell phone, we'd be like, "Holy shit, this guy, we were going to get a hold of him," but still they would know about this, that, and the other, and what the rates were. And
they all talk.
They talk a lot.
Yeah. What just real quick, what was like, did you ever consider any other agent programs at all? I feel like it probably wasn't as much of a thing then. I mean, like, Landstar was probably around, like they've had their thing for a while.
Right.
And then, but I mean, was really anyone else doing it like at scale?
No, not at all. You know, I mean, I think Echo is kind of coming up a little bit there. But yeah, like my concept, my idea of an agent was Landstar.
Yeah.
And so I had to be kind of convinced on the whole agency type thing as well. And to be honest with you, Global Trans settled on that. I mean, there were agents that were in there early on that were actually franchises because they had a franchise program at one time early on. So there was a lot of, you know, kind of playing around with what kind of model they were going to use. And then they settled the agency model, and they've done a great job growing it and building it. And, you know, it's just, you know, there's a lot of more competition now in the market than there was, you know, in 2015, something like that, 2014.
Yeah, I feel like nowadays, especially with the market being down, like everyone's fixated on like getting agents because if you're a broker,
A lot of
who
agent
brings on
posts
agents,
on
you're always
LinkedIn.
making money. Yeah, you're always making money if you're an agent, right? But then there's always like, I mean, there's always the benefits also of like you had, Tyson, you experienced like those benefits of working with like Global Trans and experiencing like that back office support that obviously helped you a lot because you're able to focus on like the stuff that you're good at and you're able to like, you know, control and stuff. That's interesting for sure. I'm curious now, like when like you see the overall market of agents like changing and evolving, there's so many other players in the game. Like, do you like see that competition and like, I don't know, like, do you recommend other people to go be an agent, or do you think right now it's better to just, I don't know, still open your own company? I'm kind of curious, like, what your thoughts are right now versus what they were like maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Paul. And, you know, I'll answer this two different ways. When I was younger, I would have done exactly what I did. But now that I'm older and more experienced, I would have done an agency. So going back and talking to my younger self, I guess there wasn't around, so I can't really tell myself that, but I would have started an agency first. To be honest with you, I don't understand the benefit nowadays with the agency models so well being operated in numerous companies, why people are starting their own. Because it's just I don't think they understand the undertaking that it takes, you know, not only, you know, capital wise, but just, you know, especially with technology now, you know, there's just so much there that it doesn't outweigh, you know, some of these splits and putting that on somebody else. You know, you have to hire all that stuff, you know, so you get a 70-30 split, you know, that 30%, you could easily spend 40-50% in, you know, back office support and other stuff, you know, if you're not really dialed in, which you're not going to be in the beginning. And it exposes you to a lot more risk. So I honestly, I talk to young people that are wanting, or people that are just wanting to get out and start their own, and I advise going the agent route. You know, there's just a lot of benefits to it nowadays that there weren't there in the past. And but I admire anybody that takes the, you know, bull by the horns and does it independently, because it's hard. It's definitely not easy.
Definitely. I mean, I started my own brokerage before, and I dealt with like the cash flow problems. Well, first of all, like having to pay trucking companies 50% up front, and then 50% at delivery, and then waiting 30 days for the customer to pay. Luckily, it was a smaller shipper, so they paid in 30 days. But obviously, like larger enterprise shippers pay 60, 90, 120. So that's definitely a huge advantage. And so, like you mentioned, the 70-30 split, which I think is basically common 70-30.
Right.
Global Trans was. I know some companies are offering now even 80-20 splits. They're getting very competitive just because of the landscape, which is like incredible. But okay, so when it comes to like getting acquired though, like an agency, how does that compare to like having a brokerage be acquired? Because you, Tyson, sold your agency. And can you walk us through maybe like the financial aspect, like the differences between someone acquiring an agency versus a brokerage that was on your own?
Yeah. So, and I think this is another benefit of joining an agency. And, you know, currently what I'm doing right now, we can get to a little bit later on, but I have a franchise with Unis Shippers. So it's the next step beyond an agency. And the great thing about the franchise is there's already a place in which I can exit within that. They've already got it set up where at a certain point you can have a discussion and you can roll over. Agents, I think, are going to start doing the same thing. You know, it's going to help them grow their internal, you know, sales force and stuff like that. Meanwhile, bringing on, it allows some of these entrepreneurs to take some chips off the table, which was the case for me. I wanted to take some chips off the table and then, redisperse them out in the industry where my experience allows me. And I just, you've kind of got a built-in buyer already in the agent model. Now, not all agencies are doing this, and not all of them are doing it consistently, but Global Trans saw this and they started acquiring. We were a top 5 agent, and so they were coming to their top agents and saying, hey, we'd like to bring you guys in. And to be honest, I think I was one of the last ones we were one of the last ones that were acquired. And I don't know I think they did one more acquisition after us because it was still in the hopper since the Worldwide Express merger happened. But yeah, I just feel like in the agency model, because so on the flip side, my independent model, when we got in trouble, I was trying to sell that son of a bitch like to anybody. I was running around, trying to get somebody to buy it from me because I had a good customer. I had, all this other stuff, but it was hard as hell to try to, like, I went and had an interview, or I was, it's been so long now, but DHE out there in LA, they're an LTL carrier. I had spent a whole day in their conference room trying to negotiate with them to sell my brokerage to them. But the complexities of trying to weave the two businesses together was just too much for them. And I get it. I totally understand. There's not always a guarantee that the business is going to transfer over. That's essentially what you're selling. I had a great team that I was pumping, as part of our acquisition. But reality is like if the customer doesn't follow, then nothing happens, right? It's not good at all. So you don't have to deal with that in an agency model. They're already working inside the organization. There's no having to pull customers over and things like that. So I think it's easier and it's kind of a lot more fundamentally better for both organizations to go through that in this type of environment, in this business, because you're basically selling the consideration is basically goodwill, is what they call it, which is your businesses.
Tyson, what's the strategy around acquisition and kind of consolidating the agencies, like having more control in-house or having more ownership over the customers themselves, or what's the reasoning for Global Trans acquiring these businesses?
I think Global Trans, for them, I think it was to build up their internal direct to sales business, customers in that aspect. So it gave them, more control over the customers. We couldn't leave or whatever. Not that that would have been easy either, but bottom line is it's a way to absorb your customers. And, the benefit, like I said, for someone like myself was it allowed me to take money off the table and then reinvest it in a new business.
Yeah, and there's no margin split there, right? There's no like 80-20 anymore. So what would, like, how does I'm not sure if you know this, but since you went through it a little bit, what are kind of some of the numbers here look like if you have a 80-20% split, the acquisition is kind of amount.
I see what you said. Yeah. It's about a multiple. I'd say from 2.5 to 3.5 on your gross profit. It might maybe be higher if you're out like as an independent agent, but I don't know. Those are more risky for people to bring on. So it's hard to justify a higher multiple, but really I think if you're between 2.5 and 3.5 on your gross revenue, or your gross profit, I'm sorry, that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah. I agree. That's interesting though. So Global Trans was really like smart about it. They let agents grow their businesses and then they acquire the ones that were successful. I'm kind of also curious if you could tell us a little bit more before we dive into like what you're working on now, Tyson, about like overall like landscape. Global Trans, like kind of like their landmark, or sorry, that might be not the right word, but like their mark on the freight industry. Because there's like the Global Trans Mafia, Andrew Leto and his brother Mike, and then there's other people also that came out of Global Trans. And I'm kind of curious if you could a little bit tell us like from what you've seen and the people that you've met at Global Trans that have made like a big impact, like Jet McCandless as well. So a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was very lucky. I being out here in the Bay Area, you hear about a lot of these opportunities where you end up in some of these, PayPal mafia, some of these other companies that have done it. And at the time, I didn't know what was going on. But since, I got to see what it was like for a new company to really get up and hit the, the road. They got investment behind them. They had a great, office environment. It was more, it was a lot of fun. It was like, I'd come in, it was in Scottsdale, or I believe it was in Phoenix. I'm trying to remember at this time real quickly. It was in the Phoenix area, but, they had a bar down below, and, the carrier sales room was, crazy. And, it was a Wolf of Wall Street type of environment. And, if you know Mike Leto, he's a great guy in character too. And it was a lot of fun. But then, as they got bigger and they were establishing themselves, they had to kind of grow up a little bit. And that was when Bob Farrell and those guys came in. It was like bringing the adults in, right? It was like they came in, they brought in private equity and, all the money and all the, organizational aspect of things to make it $1 billion company. And so to kind of see it go through that transition, and then to the transition of being acquired by WEX, and then being involved with WEX and what they're doing, and all that type of stuff. It's been a great ride. But I look back on it now, and it's crazy how many people have come out of that, incubator, Global Trans. And I root for them all. Michael Bookout's another one. I didn't know him real well, but we were all crossing paths, during that time a lot. And to see them go on and do what they're doing is pretty cool. And even with Andrew and Michael and Emerge, to see them do it again is pretty cool. They were good guys. And but it was just kind of fun to see it grow through those different stages to where it was at before, and then see it get essentially they got acquired. It wasn't a merger. WEX really acquired Global Trans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now that's the fourth or third largest brokerage in the nation with worldwide growth.
Right.
Yeah.
So after I got acquired, I had a 2-year earnout. So essentially, I was in agent development. So I worked with other agents, kind of coaching them up. And during that time, I was watching two $4 billion or $2 billion companies come together. And it was that was interesting, because that you don't get to be inside and see that happen too often, and all the complexities of bringing those together. So, it's still kind of going on. I think it's been 3 or 4 years since the transaction went down, but they've done a good job of weaving the companies together. And it's, I don't know how they were going to do it in the beginning. It was a monumental task, but they're slowly getting it all kind of transitioned into one, kind of way of doing business.
Yeah. I remember when I was just my second year of being a freight broker, I switched companies, and my first day at work, my manager's like, okay, go on globaltrans.com and check this rate, LTL rate. And for the longest time, all I thought was it's just a portal where you bought LTL shipments and stuff.
Essentially that's what they were.
That's how they started, but then they were also a broker. They also provided logistics services. But for the longest time, all I thought Global Trans was just providing me a rate on which LTL carrier I should ship on. So
it was revolutionary for that time. Because
for sure.
I could not go out. I was trying like hell to get blanket rates to get an LTL program started, and I couldn't get them anywhere. And so my buddy who I'd worked at CH with was working for Global Trans, and he said, "Hey, Tyson, we were here in the Bay Area, and we'd eat lunch all the time together." And he'd be like, "Dude, my new thing, I think it's going to work for you. You got to meet these guys." So it was really cool, and they were on a plane like that. They came out here and we sat down in a conference room, and they spit it all out. And I was like, "This is what I was looking for," because it was like an LTL aggregator, rate aggregator that like Expedia at the time. We explained it as Expedia. And so it was cool. And the ability for them to be able to get those rates came from them having the relationships in the industry too, I think was huge.
Definitely.
From their dad,
Yeah. We used to use Global Trans every day. All the LTL shipments were just moved through Global Trans.
Yeah. So, that's amazing. Yeah. I think some of these other platforms are catching up, and doing some things. And, that's going to be a challenge on Global Trans. That was their differentiator for a long time, was their technology. In fact, they kind of pitched themselves as a technology company and not really a freight company. And, I thought that was a good play for that time. Now, there's some shifting and stuff going on, but it's interesting. There's a lot happening in this industry right now.
Yeah. What are you, I guess, focused on when you see like all these things happening in the industry? What's like interesting to you? Like what sticks out? What do you focus on?
I mean, really, to be honest with you, this is freight fraud thing, and how this is going to get resolved. And again, it goes back to being an independent broker. I mean, you just got your ass out there right now, even with all these, and I recommend all having, stacks, tech stacks that have some sort of vetting system in them, highway or carrier, sure, or whatever. But, we didn't rarely have to deal with this type of stuff back in the day. I had a truckload of tampons stolen one time, and, that was about it. But, it's just a really perilous time, and I understand that these brokers being super jittery because it's just insane from the stories that I'm hearing.
That's true. I was actually when you were mentioning like the benefits of being an agent, I actually thought about like the fraud, like you're
100%.
protected. Yeah, because you're going to be using whatever tech the agent you're with or the company you're with provided you with, and they're going to have their own system. So. For vetting.
Yeah, and one of the other good things about an agency aspect too is the carrier sales thing. I mean, some of these agents you can utilize the carrier sales aspect, and I know how hard that is. We had I grew up on the cradle to grave method, and I had numerous discussions as I was building my business early on about how to do it. Because that's just, I mean, that is a hard model, but really separating it is really hard too. And so I was really adamant about owning your own freight and booking your own loads. And so it took me a lot to utilize carrier sales at Global Trans, but they had proven themselves to me and they were doing things the way I wanted to do them. We took a reefer approach to dry freight. We were super uber into detail and, all that stuff. And they did that. And so we turned over that. So it allowed me to grow even faster because I didn't have back office and I didn't have carrier sales really. We were just focusing on selling and a little bit of operations on LTO.
You're kind of like making me want to open like a brokerage under an agency right now. Makes it so much easier because I just have like the experience of opening a brokerage by itself and the pain I went through, and like all the tedious stuff that you got to take care of on a regular basis. And I never realized how difficult it was to have your own brokerage while I was like running a brokerage for someone else. I thought, oh, this is easy, but then you get into like the weeds of it and it's like all that back office takes up like all your time. And it is really difficult. The cash flow too, like having money and then dealing with the fraud.
We were doing a lot with claims. We were doing a lot with claims too, because of being in produce and a large retail, customer, they didn't give a shit. They would kick pallets here and there. And, I was having to have sometimes they were just so bad claims that I couldn't push it off on the carrier, and it was just so egregious. So then it led to us having to take losses and, that's a whole nother, discussion, but you're right. It limits your exposure and there's just more, there's more liability out there than there's ever been.
Definitely. Yeah.
So the agency kind of gives you an area to just grow.
So Tyson, you had a tier earnout. What year was it that you got acquired? The Global Trans came in and acquired your agency?
2021. And then I was
Go ahead.
I was with them for 2 years doing that. And then in 2023, so last year, March and May of last year, WEX, Worldwide Express, was taking over mainly, everything. So they came to me and said, hey, we would like to offer you we want to keep you in the family. And, we'd like to offer you a Unishippers franchise. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do this again. I kind of was like this coaching thing. I was really getting into coaching these agents and really getting to see behind the scenes for the first time of what it's like being on the other side of an agency and inside an agency and working with agents and what you can provide, what you can do for them and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, I don't know about that. So I was talking with Joel Klum. Joel is the CEO of WEX, and he was kind of pretty convincing in doing that. And at that time, I was starting to get. So when I sold the business, it was like a relief because we went from 10 years of building a business independently and all the stresses of trying to find money and, do the capital and all that stuff, to have that go bankrupt. And then it pulled us down personally the next year, my wife and I had 2 kids, 3 and 5 years old. And, and then being the last person to get paid as you're building up the next business, it was a long 15 years and 16 years. And so when we sold, I just kind of wanted to peel back, and just take a paycheck, and work with other customers. But after about a year and a half, 2 years, the juices started flowing again, and I started getting all those tingles, and I'm a true bred entrepreneur. And Joel Klum approached me just right at that time. I was starting to have those and kind of dangled this in front of me, and I eventually agreed before I asked my wife. And so I came home and told my wife that, hey, we're starting a new business. And she about shot me. She says, like, she still got PTSD from going through all that stuff. I told her she needs to write a book on what it's like being married to an entrepreneur, because it's like, she's been there. She's a dog. She, has been there with me through the ups and the downs. But we had relative quiet in our house. We bought a house kind of out in the country, and kids were homeschooled, and we just kind of chilled. But I got brought back into it, and now I'm glad. I'm happy to be back in it. And so I opened a Unishippers franchise in May of 23 as well. Well, I started Diablo Freight Ventures, and Diablo Freight Ventures houses my investments in the business. So I've made angel investments in a few businesses within the industry. Probably heard of some of them. Off Shift with Mark Manera, Dr. Mark. Vendor Flow with Eric Rodriguez, and there's a few others. So great. This is a great time for entrepreneurs in this industry, and doing things different than building a TMS is what I'm interested in. And so that has some of it. And then I'm doing coaching and consulting with freight brokers and, people who are, just trying to find their way and, get a plan started or, to sell one day, things like that. And then I have the Unishippers franchise. And so the Unishippers franchise is based on LTL and the special relationship that Worldwide Express has with UPS. So we do small package and parcel as well as LTL at Unishippers.
Okay, got it. So is that also a brokerage?
Essentially, yeah. So they have the same kind of platform as Global Trans has. So we sell LTL, broker LTL, and then the small package and parcel is what really brought me into it. I've done everything, from drayage to refrigerated to dry to LTL to pretty much covered it. And so when I had the opportunity to get involved with the small package parcel aspect, I was very intrigued. And so that was kind of what really lured me in, was the ability to kind of get in with that market or that service or that product and really develop it and work with it. And so that's what I'm doing really right now.
That's like last mile, essentially, right?
What's that?
And that's like final mile, essentially, right? Final mile.
Well, no. So like UPS has decided. So UPS is only one reseller, and it's Worldwide Express. So you can't sell UPS rates anymore. Yeah. And so what we do is we are a sales extension of UPS. UPS made a decision a few years ago, probably about 5 years ago, and Unishippers and WEX made this agreement with them where UPS has the Fortune 500 companies on lockdown, the Oakley, Nike, all those type of guys. And they have the retail sector with the UPS stores. You see them around, they have those two kind of on lock. So, but the small to medium-sized business area is where they didn't have any coverage really, and it was kind of stretching them. So they partnered with us and with Worldwide Express and Unishippers, and we sell to small to medium-sized businesses that use FedEx, UPS, or whatever, and we try to get them to use solely UPS. And we have great rates similar to kind of like blanket rates and things like that, deals with UPS that allow us to sell a small package or parcel. So we're out there competing against FedEx and some of these other ones, and not thousands of brokers, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Okay, that's fascinating. Very that's like part of like the industry I don't know much about. So it's cool to hear that from you, Tyson. I have been talking a lot though, so I'm wondering if Reed or Christian have any questions. I have another question if they don't.
Fire away, dude.
Go fireworks.
All right. So California isn't really like a freight brokering hub, just because I think it's an expensive state to operate in. Same with trucking, but things have to get moved. When you look at the freight brokerage like industry, like I guess markets, it's Chicago, Chattanooga, Austin. There are, there's Phoenix as well, and there's probably like a couple others that are pretty major, like Kansas City, St. Louis. But like usually New York, LA, SF, like those are like the really expensive cities to operate in. And typically a lot of companies like tend to not be able to like be profitable in those areas. I'm kind of wondering, like, how does the California, can you tell us more about the California market from like the freight brokerage, freight agent, like industry aspect of things? Because I don't know much about it, because it doesn't seem like a lot of stuff's like a lot of brokers are operating from there, but curious to hear your thoughts and your take on that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great question, Paul. Because for a long time I was on an island out here. This job is not one where you go to cocktail parties and people are like, "Oh shit, you're a freight broker." Like my wife used to tell people I was a truck driver just because it was easier to tell them what I did. And so, I have people come up to me, "Oh, so what's it like driving a truck?" And I like have to explain to them, like, "No, that's not what I do." But we're on an island out here, and I had an opportunity when I was younger to go and experience American backhaulers and walk into that room. And that is what sparked my, like, oh, this is what this is about. Like we had a small office in San Francisco in the Bay Area, probably like 25, 30 people in there, and they're all doing different things. There was probably 10 of us that did, truckload and LTL. And that's all we really knew. So when I walked into American Backhaulers in 2001, I was like, holy shit, this is cool. And so in my mind, I was always trying to replicate that, in my other businesses, that bullpen atmosphere, that energy, all of that. And so if you look back at my first two businesses, they're very similar. And I kind of, as this industry, the good part is, and this is the reason why I get asked a lot, why do you, because I'm originally from the Northwest, Washington State. I grew up over in the eastern part of Washington. And my friends up there are always like, what are you doing down there in California still? Why are you there? And I'm like, especially my business friends, and to me, I think the Bay Area is the major leagues for business. You've got major leagues for finance over in New York, but like business wise, you've got entertainment down in LA. But business and entrepreneurial aspect is the major leagues, and especially on the West Coast. And I get to interact with a lot of different entrepreneurs and people that are in other industries that help me grow my freight brokerage, because I didn't have those in general. Like there was nobody to reach out to try to run a freight brokerage. Like, there was no resources. And so I kind of was building a company here that was similar to kind of like what I had seen at American Backhaulers and what I was seeing out here in, not necessarily tech businesses, but just any kind of businesses. There's all kinds of businesses out here. It's a real fallacy that people don't want to do business in California. I mean, we're the 5th largest economy in the world. We've got, all the produce freight in California. We've got all kinds of, still a lot of manufacturing here and whatnot. We're like a little mini country. And so it allowed me to get under my feet in business in general. And then as it grew, as the business or as the industry has grown, and opportunities like Freight Caviar have popped up and things like that, it's allowed me to kind of see what's happening on a broader market, see what's happening in Chicago, see what's happening in Nashville, understand what's going on out there. The good thing is all that stuff's aligning with what I was going through out here in California. It just was, I didn't know it. I was having a lot of these experiences that I weren't getting validated or whatnot on, but kind of hearing about how it happens out in Chicago and whatnot helped. But you're right. It is a lot more expensive to build a freight brokerage here in California for a lot of different reasons. But just kind of the access to businesses, getting out and, walking and getting in to see businesses, there's a ton of them. And that's kind of what we do. Part of my strategy is to get in front of people as opposed to calling them or emailing them. So that helps.
Much better.
But yeah, we're out here on an island in the freight game.
And it's like the best state in the country.
The weather's not bad.
I mean, like the weather, the landscape, lots of ambitious people.
That's the thing. Yeah.
There's there's a billion trucking companies there. I mean, there is, like, the Central Valley is like the produce hub of maybe very thriving double broker industry. Yeah, for sure. But, I mean, it's like the largest port in the country. I mean, I guess, maybe some people, in Laredo might be like, no, we do more, but it's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's definitely a thrive. It might not be the freight brokerage hub, but it's definitely a freight hub. Like, there's no question of that.
Yeah.
And business, like I said, I worked in the Port of Oakland at one point. I was a terminal manager for a drayage company for a year, just to understand the trucking side of the stuff and understand the drayage thing. And, that opened my eyes to how much, freight is coming into the Bay Area, and that's not the size of what Long Beach is. Long Beach is bigger. And, so yeah, it's not it's not I can't, going out to Chicago and, Chattanooga and things like that, you get a real sense of I like it because it's around our business, right? It's around what we do. And out here, I'm kind of a small fish in a big pond when it comes to a lot of stuff, but I don't talk tech. But it's fun to, interact with people, and you run into people that do the craziest, wildest things out here, and you just would never expect it.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's a good perspective, and it was actually quite interesting. Like, you put that in like the right way, and like kind of actually, I agree with you in many things you just said. So
we get a lot of flat. We get a lot of shit, and I get it. I mean, it's there's some crazy stuff that happens here, but to be honest with you, I don't even notice it. I'm so busy, working, and obviously there's some regulations and whatnot, and I when I sold my last company, I had to pay 10% or whatever it was to the state, which I wouldn't have had to do in Florida or Nevada or whatever. But I don't know. To me, it's a tax to play in the biggest sandbox in the world as far as it comes to business. And, I'm just kind of, I enjoy it, and I could do this business anywhere else. But it's just kind of being around ambitious people and other entrepreneurs and other businesses that it really thrives and whatnot. One of the great things now is that I'm not hiring here, though. I have moved into the remote aspect of things, which has been a challenge for me, but from a leadership perspective, but it has helped from the overhead cost perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I know like Global Trans had a fairly large like presence in California, and then you mentioned you worked at C.H. Robinson in San Francisco. Does C.H. Robinson still have that office in San Francisco, or no?
Yeah, I think it's actually, at the time it was a San Francisco office, but we were in a town called Pleasanton, and I think now they're in Walnut Creek now. But I'm pretty sure it's still around. They're still around. Because a couple of my buddies still work. There's guys there that I worked with. That one guy I trained, and he's still been there 20, 22, 23 years, which is crazy.
That's impressive.
Yeah, really, with one big company like that.
Very cool. Good stuff, Tyson. Thanks for coming on. I definitely I've learned a lot, and I feel like he brought like a lot to us today, and so I appreciate that.
Let's put a bow on this by like, what does the future look like for Tyson Lawrence? What are you up to? Like, what do you want to do? What are you not doing that you want to do? Like, how are you gonna put a bow on your career? I know you probably got a lot left in the tank, but you probably think
yeah, you would have asked me that about a year or two ago. The bow was being drawn, but no, it's I'm excited to just get involved with businesses. I mean, one of the things that I want to do most, and I talked about a couple times, taking some chips off the table, was I wanted to redistribute them and get involved with some of these new companies that are starting up in the logistics space. I think there's a lot of great ideas out there. So doing some more investing in that aspect. Doing coaching. Right now I've got a webinar I'm going to be doing on Tuesday with Trey Griggs, just kind of around building a freight brokerage and kind of building to sell. And if you find yourself being stuck as you're growing, I went through that. I've gone through about everything you could go through in either being a freight broker or building a freight brokerage. So I've had to find ways around it and be ingenious to, see what worked and what didn't work. But, I'm kind of distilling that down now, and not only coaching that, but also contributing to that with Unishippers and my Unishippers franchise, which we'll continue to grow that. I'm having fun doing that. One of my strategies is getting into customers and then, using whatever mode, having as many modes in your switch, blade or in your knife as possible, and whatever the customer needs or has an opening to get in there, you utilize it. And so having small pack now as my entry point has really helped clear the clutter of other brokers coming in, because we start having that conversation around that. And then we're like, oh, you've got LTL. Oh, you've got truckload. Oh, you've got drayage. We work our way up the ladder from there. And so I'm having fun doing that now, building that business from that angle and from that strategy. So yeah, and I enjoy, talking to you guys, and you guys, I just can't compliment you enough on what you're doing and, for the industry. And I encourage you to keep doing it. And I thank you for having me on. I've been a fan, and I watch. And Paul might tell you this. I sent a text or an email I stay up late and watch YouTube videos and Freight Gong Friday and all these other things. And I think I saw Reed's interview, and there was a thing at the very end. It was like 3 a.m. or something like that. And it was like, if you've watched this long, send us a
That's amazing. Reed, you said you're going to send whoever emails, right? Like some merchant. I forgot what it was. I think here's like.
I forgot. I was back in.
Or please buy
caviar bowl or hoodie.
Hoodie. Oh snap! Okay, I gotta hook up Tyson with a hoodie. We'll get some more of those in November.
I'm a hoodie guy. That's the thing out here in the Bay Area. So I gotta rep the Freight Caviar hoodie.
All right.
Not going to go as far as a tattoo yet, though. But
what's up?
I said I'm not gonna go as far as a tattoo, but I'll.
Alex is watching here. Shout out to Alex.
Hey, and I told my wife I'm going to Serbia one day. And then she said, "Why do you want to go to Serbia?" And I said, "That's the motherland for us. We're respected there."
If you go to Serbia, let me know. It's to be an amazing time.
Well, I want to go with you.
Time.
So next time you go, you tell me.
I'm going to talk to my fiance to see if she'll let me go again.
Yeah.
I'm definitely down to go. Serbia's awesome. There's a lot of companies, great brokers out there.
Yeah.
And we have a documentary actually coming soon. It's been a while. It's been 6 months since we went there, but we're finishing it up. So we'll have a nice
great
video about that trip. Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait. I'm sure it'll be great.
Yeah.
So
thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. Really enjoy this. And yeah, we'll talk soon.
You bet. Take care, guys. Have a good one.
Later, Tyson.
Yeah.